Hello, and welcome to The Listening Room, a spirituality podcast brought to you by SpiritSourceConnect.com. My name is Suzanne Goulet, and in each episode, I'll be speaking to you about new spirituality and how you can use it to improve your daily life. By offering you insights, tools, and techniques, you'll become more aware of your connection to a higher power and begin to accelerate your path to a life of greater joy, ease, and flow. Enjoy. Today's subject is going to be from chaos to clarity, keeping up with life's changes. You know, many of us have been on a spiritual path for a while, and we understand that some of the most difficult times that we've had in our lives, where there has been a lot of chaos and change, have often turned out to be huge blessings. And I want to help people kind of see that that's exactly what often the chaos in your life is all about. But instead of seeing it as chaos, we want to take a much higher perspective. And in order to be able to do that, it's going to challenge you to the nth degree. You may not have any understanding of what is going on in your life or why, but all that you know is that there are a lot of changes occurring, and you might be seeking some understanding about that. If you have been following any of my previous broadcasts, you will have been taken through a number of guided visualizations that had the intention of causing positive change into your life. This series of radio broadcasts has actually been taking the audience through a wonderful journey of getting unstuck from where you are. Perhaps you've been trying to make changes in your life in certain areas of your life, whether it be health or finances or your right livelihood you're trying to find, or perhaps you're having some challenges in your relationship. In any case, some of the previous broadcasts have taken us through really examining each of these areas of our life and then having a discussion with the aspects of ourselves that are highly resistant to change. And so when we work with the resistant aspects of ourselves and begin to evolve and develop them, then the world becomes wide open to us. On the horizon, we can begin to walk into a tremendous amount of positive change for ourselves because we have transformed any of the resistances that we may have been holding subconsciously. So if you're interested in doing some of that work, I encourage you to listen to some of the previous broadcasts, and it can bring you up to speed. Also, if you have already been participating in some of these previous broadcasts and went through the exercises, it's very likely that now you are experiencing change. And change can be a little bit unsettling when it actually shows up. Sometimes we're stuck in the mud, so to speak, and we just want something to change, to please change. And then when it actually comes, we're thrown off course, we're thrown off balance, we don't understand exactly the form that has been delivered to us, when actually it could be the highest and best form that could ever have come. In today's show, we're going to bring us up to date with keeping up with these changes, and I'll be giving you some tools to do that with. And then I'm going to be taking some calls from people to understand what kind of changes they're going through. And then at the end, we're going to try to do a guided visualization to just kind of calm everybody down and have them be in a secure, solid place to ride these waves of change. Okay, so why is all of this change happening? It's not just you in your life. There's been change predicted for the entire world and the earth for some time. You know, we can go all the way back to Nostradamus if we want to, and there was the so-called Armageddon and the end times predicted for 2012. Oh, the world is going to end in 2012. But in the past few decades, we've been receiving a lot of really wonderful channeled materials around the changes that are occurring to the earth. And for some of you that read channeled material, we've been finding out that actually what's going on is just the end of the way things have been, and that we're going to be elevating ourselves into a much higher frequency and vibration. And what that means actually is that we're going to be becoming far more feeling centered, intuitively centered, and understanding that the world is not just everything that we can see in three-dimensional reality. Some of us have known that we're going to be moving into a fourth dimension, and that is where we see that everything really has this kind of magical way of coming together and being there exactly to support us if we have the ability and that third eye insight to be able to see what is occurring and what is being delivered to us. So I'm very proud of you if you're listening to this, and that if you have been on a spiritual path for a while. We are definitely in the minority, those of us who are listening to this kind of material, and we are going to be called upon to act as examples to many of those who are around us in our communities who are completely lost or will be getting very lost and will be needing some kind of guidance or example on how to ride through these changes. You know, it's one of the things that the Course teaches is that if you are going to be a teacher, it's much less through your words and much more through your actions and the way that you conduct your life. You know, how many of you out there have had people tell you that, you know, they've thought about you for a while and kind of the decisions that they make, and then they may even come to you and ask you for advice. These are wonderful ways that we become kind of spiritual leaders. And I'm not talking about getting onto a podium and starting to lecture or to speak or to give advice to people who haven't asked you for it. That can sometimes be very obnoxious to people. I know for myself personally, I am not crazy to be lectured at, and I'm not crazy for people to be giving me advice. I trust my own inner instincts about where to go and what to do until I get completely overwhelmed, and then I have people that I would go to and ask for their feedback. But when we're talking to other people who may be lost, it's not our job to be telling them what they should be doing, because we want to instill in them this faith that we know they will find their way through whatever chaos they're in. And this way, we assist them in finding their own self-empowerment. You know, if you've been on a spiritual path for a while, or for some of you, you might be just kind of waking up. And often what drives us to seek a higher understanding of our lives is to become seekers, to look for teachers or materials or anything that will help us understand what is going on. And I really challenge the notion that very many people have a very smooth life right now. We're all being challenged in whatever area of our life really pushes our buttons, whatever it might be, whether it be relationships for you or if it's health that you're most concerned about. There are ways that you are going to be challenged, and the purpose behind that challenge is that you can begin to develop trust and to seek higher knowledge on what these challenges are for. This is how you're going to get yourself on a higher path. This is how you're going to get yourself understanding that there is a higher power beyond your own means, and that in connecting with this higher source of energy, you will suddenly discover magic unfolding in your lives, things coming to you that you had never expected, and that everything out there that is happening to you is actually there to help you. So even though, you know, for some of you who have been on this path for a while, You can probably recall some area of your life where things you thought were going horribly, horribly wrong and not the way that you wanted at all. But a few years go by and then you see that those were the best things that could have ever happened to you. So before I go into some steps that you might want to take to allow these changes to occur with a lot more clarity and tranquility in your own inner space, I'd like to hear from a couple of people about what kind of changes they perhaps experienced in the past, only to find out that those were the best things that ever happened to them. Or perhaps you have some changes that are going on now that you realize are good for you, but you're just having a little bit of difficulty with it. And don't forget that when you decide that you're going to speak up, it's also, you never know who's listening out there who could be learning from your particular situation. So I can give you some things to think about. Was there a health crisis that changed your life? Was there something that occurred in your health that suddenly had you having to turn a sharp corner and completely change your life? That's usually what's happening with people who are having heart attacks, for instance, or any other kind of diagnosis for a terminal illness. And many of them will often come back after they've survived and gone through and say, I have completely changed for the better. Or perhaps, has there been a financial crisis that changed everything in your life? And what did you learn from that? And what about your relationships? Did something completely fall apart there? And did you learn new ways of doing relationship? And what about your work and right livelihood? This is a common one for a lot of people right now because we are all being called to find our right livelihoods and to be in alignment with our higher selves during this time. I really believe that these massive earth changes, many people will no longer be able to continue the work that they've already been doing because it wasn't ever right for them. And they have a real passion or real love for another kind of work that they'd love to do, but have been really afraid to move forward with doing it. But I want to say, this is the time now to be moving forward. We really are being asked to look at what really has value to us and what just simply doesn't anymore. And sometimes, for instance, if you've lost your job, you may suddenly discover that it really didn't have as much value to you as you thought it had. And so you might find something else being born in you that's taking you in an entirely different direction. Carolyn May says, if you've been complaining about your job for a while or you hate your job, the universe is just going to step in and cause an event that causes you to lose your job. Whether you're fired or you're laid off or the company just kind of goes bankrupt and is dissolved or gets bought out or whatever. But if you're not in right alignment with that work, it will get taken away from you, especially if you are on a spiritual path. So anyone else out there want to ask a question or share with us some of your life changes? I'd love to hear from you. Do I have a question here?
Yes.
Hello.
Suzanne, can you hear me? Hi.
Yes, I can hear you. How are you?
I'm doing great. Well, this is such an important topic. I'm so glad you're bringing this up today.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, I wanted to just share with you and your audience about, my story. It's exactly to the point that you just made about like that it will be taken away from you, especially when you have a spiritual calling. I had a fantastic career. I was a chief creative officer at a company that I actually helped to launch. So it was a startup, in California, and I thought I was basically in a very solid position, having built the company up from the ground and gone through all these transitions, and I thought that I would decide when it was time for me to leave and when it was, time for me to sort of like get back on the spiritual path.
Right.
But I remember unconsciously that, when you're on the spiritual path, Suzanne, it's a two-way street. It's not just like that you call on Spirit when it's convenient to you. Spirit calls on you, and once you've made that connection and that commitment, it's kind of like a beeper that goes off, and you're supposed to be someplace.
Yes.
And I knew that beeper had gone off about 2 years earlier, but I had ignored it because with all the economy changes going on, I didn't think it was safe or prudent of mine to sort of like quit my job and jump into this great unknown. So I was hanging on tight, just like so many people out there as well. And then out of the blue, I was part of a group layoff, totally unexpected, out of the blue. And while I was in total shock, the moment I was in the elevator riding down to the parking lot as I was escorted out of the building and the elevator doors closed, I went like, yes.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah, I was really thrilled.
So do you mind if I interrupt you for a second and ask you a couple of questions?
Absolutely. Go ahead.
So how many years ago are we talking about that you were heavily involved in this startup company?
Well, I was just part of this group layoff took place about 6 months ago. It was last summer in August.
But you had when did you first start with this company?
7 years prior, almost 7 years prior. So I've been with the company for quite a while.
Mm-hmm. And while you were working there, let's say in the last 2 years of your employment, how were you feeling? Like, did you have any kind of underlying restlessness, or were you feeling that your time was running out there at all?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, I did. First of all, I had health issues creeping up on me. I've always been a very healthy person. And all of a sudden, I had a lump in my right breast, and luckily it was benign, but nevertheless, it had to be taken out. And I had started to really be tormented by fears. I felt like I was not in the right place, and I had always followed my spiritual calling. In fact, before I took this position with this company, I went to the Andes to really experience the prophecy of the Carol Incas because I've always been following my calling. So this was part of a dream job that was destiny, but it turned into a nightmare, if that makes any sense. And when the time was up and I didn't leave, it started to really, the consequences, even on a physical level for my body, started to really show up very, very quickly.
So you said a couple of key words there. One of them was that it had become a nightmare. Number two is that your body then started to take in, actually, all of the underlying resistances that you were having about staying there, and you actually had a health catastrophe occur.
Absolutely. What I've noticed is that there's no buffer time anymore. We're not getting away with sort of hanging out in limbo, pretending, we are sort of spiritual and then not showing up when it's inconvenient, So the cocktail party spiritual stuff is just not working anymore. We're either part of the new world creation, or we're going to be, part of this death process. And like you said earlier in your show, I look at this as a wonderful opportunity. This is the most amazing time ever to be alive, because the world as we know it, as Greg Braden always refers to it, is ending, and that is what the prophecy is saying. The prophecy is not talking about an apocalyptic, terrible thing. It's just saying everything that we've come to believe in, everything that has been institutionalized will no longer exist, and that is ultimately also a good thing. It's time for renewal. But, when we hold on to that, we're part of the dying process, so it's about making that leap of faith and building that new world and building that dream of yours.
Yes, so let me back up with you a little bit, because one of the parts of your story I think is going to be an element for anyone who's experiencing change is that it will not just come and hit you with a 2x4 all of a sudden. I mean, for some people it will, but for most people who are already on a spiritual path, they have an internal dialogue going on, and they have an open communication with their feelings and their instincts. And so this did not come as a surprise to you. You
That's
knew.
True. I was absolutely well aware of it. You're absolutely right. This was not just like from one day to the other. This was about a 2-year process.
Right. So to wrap up, because you're offering so many good insights, I would like for you to share with us what was the beautiful outcome. Like, what are you doing now? What was the outcome of the changes that communicate to you that everything is in divine order?
Oh, thank you for that opportunity, because that's really the gift. Well, first of all, it was really, the biggest gift was that I had an opportunity to really not hold on to anything false any longer. So it was an opportunity for me to really surrender, and that's exactly what I did. And now I'm being guided to basically offer a service to people that helps other people to launch their businesses and launch their passions and so on and so forth. Without going into details, it's, I'm on my path. I'm starting to make a living again with something that I'm very passionate about, and best of all, I can be of service.
So you are now the owner and entrepreneur and operator of your own company.
That's right. And it's called Power Reinvention. And I'm helping people to make the leap and leave, businesses and jobs behind that no longer serve them, and really kind of like go independent. And I work with individuals, nonprofits, and, just small organizations and family businesses that are in alignment with this.
And I can already feel from you that you're very passionate about this work that you're doing. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you love what you're doing now?
20.
So are you glad?
No, 20. This is my life purpose.
So are you?
It can't get better than that.
Mm-hmm. So looking back at getting laid off, what do you think about that now?
Well, I said to Spirit, thank you. I would have not freed myself, but, I had the golden handcuffs, but I'm so glad you freed me, and I can get healthy again, and I can restore my stress levels to normal again. And in spite of uncertainties that come with being on your own in this time, when you have faith every morning that you're doing the right thing, that you're on your path, that's right. The most healthiest thing that you can be doing in the morning when you get up.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Sabina. You have brought up so many good points, and I hope that others who are listening are going to have picked up a few points with you. Thank you so much for participating.
Thank you, Suzanne, and namaste to everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. So that was a wonderful contribution, because there is an example of someone who was quite scared to leave the position, and then it just left for her. And I can tell in her voice that she is someone committed to making herself in service, or just connecting to her higher self and allowing a higher idea of who she is come into reality and fully take over her life. This is Suzanne, and I want to thank you for listening. To listen to part 2 in this series, please proceed to the next episode. Enjoy!